Visual novels are an interesting genre in the realm of video games. On the one hand, they are infamously known for their passiveness in gameplay, which that alone could be a detractor for most people. But people who can look past that will tell you that visual novels have some of the best narratives in the medium as a whole. Personally, my only experience with visual novels is playing DDLC, watching videos on Slay the Princess, and watching whatever mainly Badass Hero plays. But I will admit the little bit I've seen of the genre is very impressive, especially DDLC's extra chapters. This one image hits harder than anything The Last of Us did. But why am I talking about this? Well, I decided to make a visual novel myself. Well, actually two. Today I want to tell you the story about a series of games that first started out as a joke, but turned into something much bigger. A story about two games that tested my abilities as a game developer. A story about how I had to abandon my knowledge of Godot in order to learn a whole new engine. This is the story of the Lovin' You Tonight series. Fans of the channel may be confused on why I would make a game like this. In the past, I've made a lot of arcade style games with shooting elements. For some reason, why did I make so many of these? Point being, how did I go from action games to visual novels? Well, this started all the way back in March of last year. Believe it or not, during my time in college, I participated in a sketch comedy club called Seeing You Tonight. It was pretty much a club where a bunch of college students would write some comedy sketches to perform on stage for friends and family. It's a pretty niche but wholesome club that holds a special place in my heart.
Okay, that's it. Stop the car. We are completely lost.
What makes you think that?
We are in Jabba's palace from Star Wars Return of the Jedi. What the
And when I finally graduated, I wanted to do something special for them. Something that was both meaningful and, of course, funny. And after some brainstorming, I landed on the idea of making a dating simulator where the protagonist would get the chance to date one of the past 5 club presidents. The only problem was I only had a month to make the game because I was not going to miss the opportunity to release it on April Fool's Day. But with my experience with game jams, I was confident I was going to be able to make something presentable. Thus began a series of games I was not expecting to put on my resume, but here we are. With such a short deadline, I decided to use a game engine I was very familiar with. That engine ultimately being Godot. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's been following this channel, but I was very concerned I wouldn't have enough time to learn a new engine or framework, like RenP'y for example. Plus, there was a Godot add-on I was very excited to try out, that tool being, appropriately named, the Godot Dialogue Manager. From what I gathered at the time, it was a simple plug-and-play add-on that would help create text-based dialogue for any Godot project. And yeah, it was really easy to use. There are obviously some things I needed to add in addition to this, such as character portraits and transitions, but this was a very solid base for the project. The first real thing I worked on was creating a node scene. This object would hold several values, such as the scene's dialogue, backgrounds, and music. There were 2 different types of scene nodes. One that moved the story along in a linear fashion, and one that stored 2 scene nodes depending on the choices the player made. These 2 objects would help create multiple paths and make it function like a real visual novel. But functionality isn't what's going to sell it as the true visual novel. What's going to bring it to the next level is the visuals and sound. And that is a really funny story. Okay, so for the backgrounds, I decided to drive all the way to my college campus and take some photos. With these pictures, I put a paint filter over it to sell that anime background effect. Honestly, the more I look at the background, the more I feel like it looks like a crappy 1990s visual novel. But honestly, I think it fits the theme. As for the portraits, I decided to contact 2 members of the club and ask them if they were willing to draw a couple of our friends in an anime art style. And to my surprise, they said yes, drew the portraits, and never questioned it. One of my friends did comment that the reference photos I sent looked like visual novel portraits, but they never looked deeper into it. I think they just assumed I was going to make a joke video, but I think it's crazy that they just drew them for me and never once asked why I needed them. As I was waiting for the art, I decided to work on the story for the game. Now, I am familiar with writing scripts thanks to my experience with Seeing You Tonight, so it was pretty easy to come up with some entertaining scenarios. Since this was supposed to be an April Fool's joke, I decided to make the story very cliched, like anime girl being late for school with a piece of toast in their mouth cliche. Since this was a game made for my friends and mine, I decided to add a bunch of inside jokes and references that the whole club would get, but I made sure the writing was entertaining enough, so if there was a chance that someone who's never heard of Seeing You Tonight played the game, they would still find enjoyment in the cheesy dialogue. All of this to say, This is definitely not my best writing. But that doesn't mean the story isn't fun and entertaining, which was the entire goal of the project, so I consider this a win. Conveniently, once I was finished with the dialogue, my friends were able to send me the finished art. And with these new portraits, I modified my scene notes to let me fade in and out character portraits whenever I wanted. I'll be honest, the implementation could have been better, but by the time I got the art, I only had 3 days left, so optimization was not a top priority for me. Especially since I had to deal with the project completely crashing on me for no reason whatsoever. I don't even know what happened. One day, Godot updated, I loaded the project, and everything went to hell. And I tried everything to salvage this project. I tried recloning the project, I tried downgrading my Godot software, I tried re-downloading the Godot dialogue manager. It seemed like no matter what I did, the project was just broken. And at this point, I was completely terrified. I thought I had to either create a whole new Godot project, quickly learn RenP'y to get something up and running, or just cancel the project entirely. Thankfully, 2 days before I planned to release the game, it just started working again? I honestly wish I had a better explanation for this, but it ended up working again, magically. You know what, it doesn't matter, because I was able to wrap up on whatever cutscenes needed to be worked on, fix any glitches I noticed while playing, and built the project. That's not the end of the story, however, because as I was working on this project, I was scheming. I first put out a message on my club's Discord saying I had a special project in the works, and to expect it to come out in the last week of March. Although I said this to throw them off and not assume that it was just an April Fool's joke. This alone got my friends very excited, and a lot of them were curious to see what I had in store for them. Most of them just assumed it would just be an innocent YouTube video, since I said I would upload it on their official YouTube channel. But little did they know that the video I was going to upload there was actually the game's trailer. I made sure to keep my lips sealed and only give the bare minimum of updates on the project's completion. Once I had everything set up, and there was only 1 week left of March, I told my friends that I needed to push the project back to April 1st, and that I would be hosting a Discord call for anyone to join and give their unfiltered reactions to my month-long passion project. And their reaction...
I'm going to explode. I don't know what is gonna happen. Now make seeing you tonight.
Oh, no fucking way. Is this what I think it is?
Oh my god, it's Kaylee's room.
It's my room.
Yep, it is. Yes. Is this a CD tonight fucking dating sim?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I knew it.
Oh my god.
Holy shit.
It's a real game.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god. No!
Oh my.
Was exactly what I expected. They were completely shocked that this game existed. At first, they thought it was just a mock-up video, but once they saw me open up the game and we were playing through several routes that night, they were all flattered and in utter disbelief. Older members of the club were especially impressed because little did I know that they actually had an idea for a visual novel in the past. It just never passed the concept phase. So the release of Loving You Tonight was something very special to them. Let's not get it twisted though. This isn't some amazing masterpiece I built, both in gameplay and story. Again, it is very cliched and it's a very short run. You can probably complete all the routes in less than an hour. And the game lacks some quality of life options that are considered the standard for visual novels. It didn't even launch with a save feature, which kinda says how rushed this game was actually. But that wasn't the goal of the project. Not everything needs to be innovative or even polished. Sometimes it's okay to have something that doesn't push boundaries and is just plain dumb fun. And I'd say the original Loving You Tonight is fun. Now as for my experience working on the game, it was a good time. Although if I were to remake this project, I probably wouldn't use Godot. Don't get me wrong, I love the engine, it is amazing, and I'm currently using it for my main project. But I don't know, maybe I'm just biased because the project randomly crashed on me, but I think for something like this, I would have been better off using a pre-built system or framework. Something that had visual novels in mind, as all the systems I was building from scratch could have already been found in something like RenP'y. Usually I like to have control over my game and knowing exactly what everything does, but for this specific genre, I feel like you just need something that works rather than something that you have full control over. So yeah, I overall would have preferred to try a different framework or engine. Thankfully, I would get the chance to try something new as my next project was something I was not expecting. Something I probably should have expected but was still caught off guard about was that the club wanted me to make a sequel for Loving You Tonight. Specifically, they wanted a game where you could date all the directors of the club. which for context, in order of priority of people in the club, the directors are considered the second in command right below the president. At first, I was hesitant to make one for 2 reasons. One, if I were to make a sequel, I knew I'd want to make it from scratch because there was just too many issues with the first game and I wanted to avoid that. And 2, while I knew all the presidents on some personal level, I was not that familiar with the directors. I was friends with all of them, but I knew if I made a sequel, I would want the story to be bigger and better than the first one, and I just didn't think I'd be able to write a story good enough with my limited knowledge of the directors personally. But I ended up caving in and decided to make a sequel for Loving You Tonight because I would find solution to both those factors. In regard to engine changes, I made the decision to try to learn RenP'y. For those who aren't aware, RenP'y is a Python framework that is designed exclusively to make visual novels. And while I avoided using RenP'y for my first game, after sitting down and learning it, God, I wish I used this instead. To no one's surprise, everything you need for a visual novel is in this framework. Text boxes, portrait animations, dialogue speed, the ability to make multiple routes, a save feature with multiple save slots. Literally everything I haphazardly made for the first game was all here in this framework with none of the blemishes. And since Python is one of the first languages I learned, it was so easy to make a simple project and get it up and running. If you ever plan on making a visual novel, don't use anything else. The learning curve is very small and the results are way better than making it from scratch. I mean, I guess if you're planning on porting your game to multiple consoles, it's good to start from something else, but if you're just doing PC, forget about it. But I still had the Herculean task of writing a compelling story starring 4 people, 2 of which I've only met during their senior year. How was I supposed to write a story about people I barely even knew? Answer: get someone else to help write with you. Meet my good buddy Joel. He was one of the first people I met at Seeing You Tonight, and more importantly, he was a member of the club much longer than I have, so he knew everything there was about old members of the club. He also had experience with sketch writing during his time in the club, so if there was anyone who'd be able to help me write a sequel for Loving You Tonight, it was him. So I decided to hit him up and ask if he wanted to co-write with me. And to no one's surprise, he said yes. So with a new engine in my arsenal and a crack team of 2 people, the development of Loving You Tonight 2 officially began. So the plan was to first write the game's script, then I would convert that dialogue into RenP'y code so I could put that in the game. I really wanted to make sure the story was airtight as possible to avoid working on scenes that would get cut later on. And in regards to the story, Joel and I originally had no idea what we were doing. Apart from wanting it to take place in a summer camp, we had no idea what we wanted the plot to be. We were just throwing darts at a wall and just struggling to find something that stuck. But at the end of one of our calls, I randomly just said, what if we just made a route where there was a And Joel liked the idea so much that we decided to make the game center around that one plot point. Despite that, it did take us a month to create the entire script, but it was such a fun time just coming up with fun scenarios that the characters could be in that it didn't really feel that bad. Once the script was completed, I went through the effort of manually editing the document to represent RenP'y code, then I would just copy and paste it into a RenP'y file. After that, I would go into the file and add all the necessary images and sound cues. It took a bit, but having a pre-made script made it so much easier than how I did it in Godot. Editor's note, I forgot to mention this, but halfway through working on porting the script to the game, I would end up finding this application called To Renpy. The name of it kind of speaks for itself. It would just convert Word doc files into RenP'y code. It was created by the user Pass By Reference, and it saved me several hours of work, to be honest. So I just wanted to shout out the guy and thank him for making it, and I have a link to the video showcasing the tool in the description because I'm sure this would benefit a lot of people who are using RenP'y. But anyway, back to the devlog. At first I started using placeholder images, similar to how I worked on the first game, but over time those would turn into actual backgrounds that I would edit in Affinity Photo. I made the backgrounds in a slightly different art style than the first game, making it more like a children's book feel, with the images fading into black or white depending on the time of day. Aesthetically, I think it looks a lot better than the smeared look of the first game. I also worked on the game's UI, making the dialogue boxes have this camp wood look to it, and still have a hint of yellow and blue bleeding into the game to match the club's color scheme. Regarding the portraits, I was originally going to contact the same people who worked on the first game, but Joel decided to draw some concept art for the game and I thought it had a lot of potential. So I asked him if he was willing to try to draw the portraits for the entire cast. And while he did admit he was unsure if he could pull it off, he was willing to try. So I gave him a list of people that he needed to draw, and he would slowly but surely give me every portrait that I needed. And I have to say, the results are honestly really freaking amazing. They generally look professional, and I was originally stunned on how good they looked. And having all the portraits in one consistent art style made the game look a lot more like an official product rather than a rushed indie game. Which it was. But still. In regards to audio, I just decided to look up some royalties-free sound effects, but for the game's soundtrack, I actually decided to buy some licensed music. Can it be argued that that's a little unnecessary for a free project? Yeah, but at least I could say this game now has a budget of $15! Now, while programming in RenP'y was easy, there were some growing pains when starting out. For one, there is no real editor for RenP'y since it's a framework and not a dedicated engine. There were some debug tools that help, but I found them very cumbersome in comparison to the simple node editor in Godot. Personal preference I know, but it is something I wanted to point out. I also found out if I wanted to get a little fancy with my game, looking for resources was a bit more tricky than other tools. Maybe it's just the stuff I was specifically looking for, or I just wasn't looking deep enough, but I found that there was half as much content for RenP'y as there was for something like Godot. However, I will praise RenP'y's documentation, both inside and outside its codebase, as I found everything really readable and never found it difficult to figure out what something did. So building stuff off of it was pretty intuitive. However, my biggest problem with RenP'y at the moment is currently how it makes web builds. It is frankly a lot more buggy than any other engine I've used. It is labeled unexperimental, so I won't give it too much flack, but if you are going to use RenP'y for your main visual novel, I would recommend making desktop versions, in addition to a web application. But anyway, after I fully implemented the story, I decided to add some extra content to the game, such as an animated title screen, an album where you could view all the images you unlocked, and a hidden achievement system to enable secret endings. Once that was done, I had Joel playtest the game, fix any typos he found, then finally built the game. Once we had the game in a finished state, I let the club know on Discord that a sequel to Lovin' You Tonight would be released, appropriately named Lovin' You Tonight Director's Cut. And just like the first game, I had a bunch of Seeing You Tonight members join a Discord call so we could all play it together. And they were thrown completely for a loop that night. Not only were they able to appreciate the jump in quality from the first game, I also noticed that they were a lot more engaged in the story this time. If you are interested in seeing my friends' reactions to playing either of these games, I have some highlight videos in the description below. Just to be warned, it is a bunch of college students with unfiltered mouths. While there isn't anything bad, there is definitely a lot more swear words than you would find in a typical Acro Projects video.
Suddenly, you and Raleigh bumped into a familiar face.
He's coked out.
It's Becca. Are they Yowie?
Are
Not
they
as short
what?
as Andrew, though.
Are they Yowie? What is Yowie?
This project kind of pisses me off, to be honest.
Tell me about it.
You know what else pisses me off? The fact that Henry McLeod doesn't eat his mac and cheese in 1990s Home Alone.
Best reference ever.
Oh my god.
I feel like this is a real thing he said.
I would say Raleigh because he's here.
Raleigh.
He's emotionally available.
I would almost say not Raleigh because he is here.
That is a very good point.
Sorry, Becca, but I'm gonna be supporting
In
Raleigh
your
tonight.
balls, Rebecca. Suck it. Oh my god.
With horse on, hate to break it to you, but we're getting along pretty well.
I wouldn't be so sure about that. I was chatting with Horse-san yesterday, and they didn't seem too interested in working with
fucking rat.
As weird as it may sound, whenever I rewatch these videos, I think about why I enjoy making games as a whole. Don't get me wrong, these games are not anything spectacular, especially the first one. But seeing people enjoy a game that you worked so hard on provides a feeling that I can't even describe. Making a game that gives an experience that you know people won't forget. Hell, just making a game that makes another person smile is a high that I forever want to chase. To get a little personal, I made these games when I was searching for employment, and anyone who's been searching for a job in the tech field for the past 3 years knows it's not as easy as people make it out to be. And I'm not gonna lie, during this time I questioned a lot of things. And one of those things being if game development was something I truly wanted to do. Not even professionally, just as a hobby. I didn't participate in any game jams, I would cancel a bunch of projects behind the scenes, and there were even moments I wouldn't touch Godot for months. At this point, is game development even for me? Is this something I even want to do? Well, it's been a year since Lovin' You Tonight Director's Cut's been released, and I'm currently getting by as a software engineer. Admittedly, found some new hobbies to help socialize, but despite all that, I'm still working on games. So honestly, I would say yes. If you are at all interested in playing any of the Loving You Tonight games, I have linked our itch pages in the description of this video. I'd say if you're the least bit curious about these games, I'd give Director's Cut a chance. Speaking of Director's Cut, I want to give a huge shout out to Joel for helping out with the game. I feel like I've been sort of underplaying how helpful he was during the process of making the game, but I just want to say this wouldn't have been possible without his help. So if you're seeing this, thank you so much, man. He also makes YouTube content, so in the description I have his YouTube channel if you wanted to check him out. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to the club that inspired both these games, Seeing You Tonight. I know I have a lot of links in the description this time, but below I have a custom playlist of all my favorite sketches we've performed throughout the years. And just like the Loving You Tonight games, these sketches are very dumb, but very entertaining. So I promise you'll have a good time watching those. That's all I have to say for now. Don't know when I'm going to be back, but expect more content in the future. So with that all being said, take care, comb your hair, and I'll see you guys later.